They thought she was just another kid they could intimidate into silence. They were wrong. Dead wrong. This is the true story of how one teenage girl with a smartphone brought down a corrupt officer, his bully son, and exposed a legacy of abuse that had gone unchallenged for decades. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply refuse to be afraid. Maya Kingsley stood at the entrance of Brookwood High School, her backpack straps digging into her shoulders, her heart doing that nervous dance it always did on first days. You know that feeling, right? When your stomach feels like it's full of butterflies wearing combat boots. That was Maya. 16 years old, new school, new town, new everything. She'd spent the night before picking out her outfit. Nothing too flashy, nothing too plain. Just normal. She wanted to blend in, to make friends, to have that fresh start everyone talks about. Her mom had driven her that morning, and before Maya got out of the car, Judge Delilah Kingsley had squeezed her daughter's hand and said, "Just be yourself, sweetheart." That's always been enough. Maya had smiled, kissed her mom's cheek, and walked toward those big double doors with something that felt like hope looming in her chest. She had no idea that hope was about to be tested in ways she couldn't imagine. The hallways of Brookwood High were exactly like you'd picture, lockers slamming, students laughing in clusters, that specific smell of floor cleaner and teenage anxiety that every high school seems to have. Maya clutched her schedule in her hand, trying to find room 203 for first period English, when she felt it. That prickle on the back of your neck. That sense that someone is watching you. She turned, and that's when she saw him. Evan Lorne. Now, Evan was a senior. Tall, athletic build, the kind of guy who walked through hallways like he owned them. And in a way, at Brookwood High he kind of did. His Letterman jacket hung perfectly on his shoulders. His hair was styled just right. But it was his eyes that Maya noticed first, cold, calculating, with a cruelty that seemed to simmer just beneath the surface. He was staring at her. Not the way someone looks at a new student with curiosity. No, this was different. This was predatory. Maya looked away quickly, her pulse quickening. Just ignore it, she told herself. Just get to class. But Evan had other plans. Hey. His voice cut through the hallway noise as he stepped directly into her path. You're new. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. An observation made by someone who was sizing up whether you were prey or not. Maya lifted her chin, meeting his eyes with as much confidence as she could muster. Yeah, I am. Excuse me. I'm trying to find. I don't remember giving you permission to walk through my hallway, Evan said, and there was a smile on his face, but it didn't reach his eyes. It was the kind of smile that made your blood run cold. A few students had stopped to watch. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked away. This wasn't new, Maya realized. This was a pattern. Evan did this. Regularly. And people had learned not to interfere. Your hallway? Maya's voice was steady, even though her hands were trembling. I'm pretty sure this is a public school. The hallway belongs to everyone. The smile dropped from Evan's face like a mask being ripped off. You've got a mouth on you, he said, stepping closer. Too close. Invading her personal space in a way that made every alarm bell in Maya's brain start ringing. That's going to be a problem for you here. See, at Brookwood, new kids, especially mouthy ones, they learn their place pretty quick. And your place is wherever I tell you it is. He reached out, his hand going for her backpack strap, and Maya stepped back instinctively. Don't touch me, she said firmly. Evan's eyes flashed with something dark. What did you just say to me? And that's when Maya made the decision that would change everything. Her hand slipped into her pocket, found her phone, and with practiced ease, because this generation, they know their phones like extensions of their own hands, she angled it upward and pressed record. The phone stayed in her pocket, but the camera was capturing everything. The audio was crystal clear. I said don't touch me, Maya repeated, her voice louder now. I don't know what your problem is, but I'm just trying to get to class. Leave me alone. Evan's jaw clenched. He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper that her phone still caught perfectly. You just made a big mistake, new girl. You have no idea who you're messing with. My family runs this town. My grandfather was sheriff. My dad, I.S. a cop. And me? I can make your life here a living hell. Then I guess I'll deal with that, Maya said, her voice shaking now but still defiant. But right now, you need to get out of my way. For a moment, Evan just stared at her, like he couldn't believe someone had actually stood up to him. Then he laughed, a cruel, sharp sound that made Maya's skin crawl. Oh, you're going to regret this, he said, and then he stepped aside with an exaggerated bow. By all means, Your Majesty.
Go to class.
Maya walked past him on legs that felt like jelly, her heart hammering so hard she thought everyone could hear it. She didn't look back. She didn't run. She just walked, with as much dignity as she could manage, until she turned the corner and finally let out the breath she'd been holding. She made it to English class. She sat in the back. She barely heard a word the teacher said because her mind was replaying that encounter over and over. But she'd done it. She'd stood up to a bully on her first day. She'd documented it. And now she just wanted the day to be over so she could go home, tell her mom, and figure out what to do next. But Evan Lorne wasn't done with her. Not even close. By lunchtime, word had spread. The new girl had talked back to Evan Lorne. The new girl wasn't afraid. And Evan? Evan was humiliated. In his mind, she'd disrespected him in front of witnesses. She'd challenged his authority. And that couldn't stand. Maya was at her locker, switching out books for afternoon classes, when she felt that presence again. She turned, and there he was, but this time he wasn't alone. He had 3 of his friends with him, other athletes, other guys who'd learned that following Evan meant you got to be part of the power instead of under it. We need to talk, Evan said, and his voice was different now. Harder. Angrier. I don't think we do, Maya replied, her hand instinctively moving toward her phone again. And that's when Evan saw it. The slight movement. The protective gesture. His eyes narrowed. Were you recording me? He demanded. This morning. Were you recording our conversation? Maya's silence was answer enough. Evan's face went red with rage. Give me that phone. Right now. No, Maya said simply. Give me the phone. Evan lunged forward, grabbing for her backpack, and Maya stumbled backward, her books scattering across the floor. Students were gathering now, forming a circle, that awful mob mentality where everyone wants to see what happens but nobody wants to get involved. Get away from me, Maya shouted, and she was scared now, genuinely scared, because Evan looked like he was ready to physically hurt her. And then Evan did something calculated. Something evil. Something that showed exactly how dangerous he really was. He grabbed his own arm, squeezed it hard enough to leave a mark, and then he fell backward dramatically, knocking into his friends. She attacked me, he yelled. Did you all see that? She just assaulted me. Maya's mouth fell open in shock.
What? No.
I didn't touch you. I didn't. She hit me. Evan continued, and his friends were nodding, backing up his lie, and Maya realized with growing horror that this was a setup. This was planned. She's crazy. Someone call security. One of Evan's friends shouted. I have it on video. Maya said desperately, holding up her phone. I have proof that I didn't. But Evan was faster. He snatched the phone from her hand, and before Maya could react, he'd thrown it down the hallway where it skittered across the floor and cracked against a wall. Somebody needs to control this psycho, Evan said, cradling his arm like he was injured. She attacks people on her first day? What kind of school is this? Maya felt tears of frustration and fear burning in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. You're lying, she said, her voice breaking. Everyone here saw what really happened. You came at me. You tried to take my phone. I never touched you. But as she looked around at the crowd of students, she saw mostly averted eyes.
Fear.
Nobody wanted to speak up. Nobody wanted to be Evan's next target. A teacher finally pushed through the crowd. Mr. Harrison, the vice principal. What's going on here? She attacked Evan Lorne, sir. One of Evan's friends said immediately. We all saw it. She went crazy and hit him. That's not true. Maya protested. He's lying. Check the security cameras. Check. Maya Kingsley? Mr. Harrison looked at her with something like pity in his eyes. Come with me to the office.
Now.
And that's when things went from bad to catastrophic. Because as Mr. Harrison was leading Maya toward the administrative office, as students whispered and pointed, as Evan smirked behind her back with the satisfaction of someone who just won a game, the front doors of Brookwood High opened. And in walked Officer Ray Lorne, Evan's father. He was in full uniform, his badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights, his hand resting on his belt near his weapon in that casual but threatening way some cops do. His face was set in hard lines, his jaw clenched, and when his eyes found Maya, there was nothing professional in his gaze. There was only fury. "That's her," he said, pointing at Maya. "That's the girl who assaulted my son." Mr. Harrison looked confused. "Officer Lorne, with all due respect, this is a school disciplinary matter. We were just heading to—" "This isn't a school matter anymore," Officer Lorne interrupted, his voice booming through the hallway. "This is assault. This is criminal. And I'm here to make an arrest." Maya's blood turned to ice. "Sir, I didn't assault anyone," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Your son is lying. I have video evidence on my phone that shows." "You have the right to remain silent." Officer Lorne cut her off, and he was walking toward her now, pulling out handcuffs, and the entire school seemed to hold its breath. "Officer Lorne, please." Mr. Harrison tried again. "Let's all go to my office and sort this out calmly." But Ray Lorne wasn't listening. He grabbed Maya's arm, roughly, violently, with a force that made her gasp in pain. "Hands behind your back," he ordered. "You're hurting me," Maya said, and her voice was shaking now, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "Please, you're hurting me." "I said hands behind your back," Officer Lorne roared, and then he spun Maya around, slammed her against the lockers with a force that knocked the wind out of her and wrenched her arms behind her back. The handcuffs went on so tight that Maya cried out in pain. Students were screaming now. Teachers were trying to intervene. But Officer Lorne was a man on a mission, and that mission was protecting his son at any cost. He dragged Maya down the hallway, her feet barely touching the ground, and pushed her through the front doors of the school. Outside, his police car was parked haphazardly across the parking lot, lights still flashing. "This is illegal," Maya managed to say through her tears and pain. "You can't arrest me without investigating. You can't." Officer Lorne shoved her against the hood of his car, pressing her face down against the hot metal. "I can do whatever I want," he snarled close to her ear. "You attacked my son. You're going to learn what happens when you mess with the Lorne family." And then came the moment that would change everything. From somewhere nearby, Maya heard a voice she recognized.
"Calm. Clear.
Powerful. "Raymond Lorne, step away from my daughter. Right now." Officer Lorne froze. He looked up, and his face went pale. Standing at the edge of the parking lot, having just arrived in response to a frantic call from the school, was Judge Delilah Kingsley, Maya's mother. And the expression on her face was something Officer Lorne had clearly never wanted to see directed at him. It was the face of a woman who knew the law inside and out, who had power, who had authority, and who had just watched a police officer brutalize her child. "Judge Kingsley," Officer Lorne stammered, and for the first time, uncertainty crept into his voice. "Release my daughter immediately," Delilah said, walking forward with measured steps. "What you are doing is unlawful arrest, excessive force, and abuse of authority. And it's all being recorded." She held up her own phone, camera pointed directly at Officer Lorne. Behind her, other parents were doing the same. Students had their phones out. The school security cameras were capturing everything. Officer Lorne's hands loosened on Maya's arms. Reality was crashing down on him, but he wasn't ready to admit defeat. "Your daughter assaulted my son," he said, but his voice lacked conviction now. "I have every right to." "You have no right to touch her without probable cause, proper investigation, or due process," Delilah cut him off. "You have no right to use excessive force on a minor. You have no right to conduct an arrest based solely on your son's word without any evidence or witness corroboration. You've violated at least 6 department protocols and multiple constitutional rights. So I'll say this one more time. Release my daughter and step away." For a long moment, nobody moved. It was like the entire world was holding its breath. Then Officer Lorne uncuffed Maya, roughly, without apology. She stumbled forward into her mother's arms, sobbing now, her wrists bruised and red from the handcuffs. Delilah held her daughter close, but her eyes never left Officer Lorne's face. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "Not even close. There will be a hearing. There will be an investigation. And you will answer for what you've done here today." Officer Lawrence's face hardened again. "Is that a threat, Judge?" "No," Delilah Kingsley replied. "It's a promise." As mother and daughter walked back toward their car, as students whispered and teachers looked on in shock, as Officer Lawrence stood alone in the parking lot with the weight of his mistake finally beginning to dawn on him, Maya looked back one last time. And she saw Evan standing at the school entrance, watching. His expression wasn't smug anymore. It was something else. It was fear. Because the Lorne family had just learned something they should have known from the beginning. Maya Kingsley wasn't just any new student. She was the daughter of a judge. She had been raised to understand justice, to value truth, to never back down from what was right. And they had just declared war on the wrong girl. When darkness tries to win, courage fights back. The days following Maya's arrest felt like living in a nightmare that refused to end. She'd gone home that first day with bruises on her wrists that bloomed purple and yellow, physical proof of Officer Lawrence's brutality. Her mother had photographed everything, the marks, the torn fabric on Maya's shirt where she'd been slammed against the lockers, the scrape on her cheek from being pressed against the hot hood of the police car. Evidence. Documentation. The building blocks of justice. But evidence and documentation don't erase trauma. Maya couldn't sleep that first night. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt those handcuffs biting into her skin, heard Officer Lawrence's voice growling in her ear, saw Evan's cruel smile as he'd orchestrated the entire nightmare. She'd wake up gasping, her heart racing, her mother rushing into the room to hold her until the panic subsided. "I'm sorry, baby," Delilah whispered into her daughter's hair during one of those long, dark nights. "I'm so sorry this happened to you. But we're going to make this right. I promise you, we're going to make this right." And Judge Delilah Kingsley was a woman who kept her promises. Within 48 hours, she'd filed formal complaints with the police department, the school board, and the state oversight committee. She'd requested all footage, body cam, school security, everything. She demanded a full misconduct hearing for Officer Lorne and disciplinary proceedings for Evan. She'd assembled a case so airtight, so meticulously documented, that it should have been a straightforward path to justice. But the Lorne family didn't become powerful by playing fair. The first threat came 3 days after the incident. Maya was in her room, trying to focus on homework she'd missed, when her mother's phone rang. Delilah answered, and Maya heard her mother's voice shift from professional to cold in the span of a heartbeat. "Is that supposed to scare me?" Delilah said into the phone. "Let me be very clear. I don't respond to intimidation. Whatever you think you're going to accomplish with these threats, you're wrong.
Goodbye."
She hung up, but Maya had seen her mother's hands shaking. "Mom?" Maya appeared in the doorway. "What was that?" Delilah's face softened when she saw her daughter. "Nothing for you to worry about, sweetheart. Just someone making empty threats." But they both knew the threats weren't empty. Over the next week, strange things started happening. Anonymous messages appeared on social media. Vicious, cruel posts calling Maya a liar, an attention seeker, claiming she'd fabricated everything for sympathy. Someone spray-painted "snitch" across their mailbox. Late-night phone calls with nothing but heavy breathing on the other end. A brick through their living room window with a note attached. "Drop it or else." The community was dividing. Some people, those who dealt with the Lorne family's abuse of power before, quietly reached out to offer support. But others, especially those with connections to law enforcement or to the Lorne family's decades-long legacy in town, turned hostile. "The Lornes have been protecting this community for generations," one neighbor said coldly when Delilah ran into her at the grocery store. "And you're trying to destroy them over some schoolyard drama? Shame on you." Maya stopped going to school. The administration had suggested a temporary transfer to online learning for everyone's safety, which really meant they didn't want to deal with the controversy. She spent her days at home, working through assignments, preparing for the hearing, trying to process the trauma while simultaneously gearing up for battle. But she wasn't alone. Remember those students who'd witnessed everything in the hallway? Some of them had stayed silent out of fear. But just a few brave souls had come forward. A girl named Ashley Chen had been recording on her phone from a different angle. A sophomore named Marcus Wells had written a detailed statement about everything he'd seen. They were terrified, but they were willing to testify. "Why are you doing this?" Maya had asked Ashley during one of their video calls while preparing for the hearing. "You could just stay out of it. It would be safer." Ashley had looked at her with fierce determination. "Because I'm tired of being scared of Evan Lorne. I'm tired of watching him hurt people and getting away with it. And because what happened to you was wrong. Someone has to stand up. Might as well be me." That's what courage looks like, you know? It's not the absence of fear. It's being terrified and doing the right thing anyway. The misconduct hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks after the incident. 3 weeks for the Lorne family to prepare their defense, to rally their supporters, to do everything in their power to make this go away. And they tried everything. Officer Lorne's attorney painted him as a devoted father who'd simply been protecting his son from a violent student. They tried to get Maya's phone records suppressed. They dug into Delilah's past cases, looking for anything they could use to discredit her. They even tried to claim that Maya had a history of aggressive behavior, a complete fabrication, but they were desperate. Evan himself doubled down on the lie. In his statement, he described Maya as having attacked him unprovoked, claiming she'd been unstable and aggressive from a moment she arrived at school. His friends backed up every word, their stories rehearsed and synchronized. On the surface, it looked like it might actually work. The Lorne family had money, connections, and decades of goodwill built up in the community. They had people in power who owed them favors. They had a legacy to protect. But they had underestimated 2 things. When darkness tries to win, courage fights back. The days following Maya's arrest felt like living in a nightmare that refused to end. She'd gone home that first day with bruises on her wrists that bloomed purple and yellow, physical proof of Officer Lorne's brutality. Her mother had photographed everything, the marks, the torn fabric on Maya's shirt where she'd been slammed against the lockers, the scrape on her cheek from being pressed against the hot hood of the police car. Evidence. Documentation. The building blocks of justice. But evidence and documentation don't erase trauma. Maya couldn't sleep that first night. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt those handcuffs biting into her skin, heard Officer Lawrence's voice growling in her ear, saw Evan's cruel smile as he'd orchestrated the entire nightmare. She'd wake up gasping, her heart racing, her mother rushing into the room to hold her until the panic subsided. "I'm sorry, baby," Delilah whispered into her daughter's hair during one of those long, dark nights. "I'm so sorry this happened to you, but we're going to make this right. I promise you, we're going to make this right." And Judge Delilah Kingsley was a woman who kept her promises. Within 48 hours, she'd filed formal complaints with the police department, the school board, and the state oversight committee. She'd requested all footage, body cam, school security, everything. She'd demanded a full misconduct hearing for Officer Lorne and disciplinary proceedings for Evan. She'd assembled a case so airtight, so meticulously documented, that it should have been a straightforward path to justice. But the Lorne family didn't become powerful by playing fair. The first threat came 3 days after the incident. Maya was in her room, trying to focus on homework she'd missed, when her mother's phone rang. Delilah answered, and Maya heard her mother's voice shift from professional to cold in the span of a heartbeat. "Is that supposed to scare me?" Delilah said into the phone. "Let me be very clear. I don't respond to intimidation. Whatever you think you're going to accomplish with these threats, you're wrong.
Goodbye."
She hung up, but Maya had seen her mother's hands shaking. "Mom?" Maya appeared in the doorway. "What was that?" Delilah's face softened when she saw her daughter. "Nothing for you to worry about, sweetheart. Just someone making empty threats." But they both knew the threats weren't empty. Over the next week, strange things started happening. Anonymous messages appeared on social media. Vicious, Cruel posts calling Maya a liar, an attention seeker, claiming she'd fabricated everything for sympathy. Someone spray-painted snitch across their mailbox. Late-night phone calls with nothing but heavy breathing on the other end. A brick through their living room window with a note attached. Drop it or else. The community was dividing. Some people, those who dealt with the Lorne family's abuse of power before, quietly reached out to offer support. But others, especially those with connections to law enforcement or to the Lorne family's decades-long legacy in town, turned hostile. The Lornes have been protecting this community for generations, one neighbor said coldly when Delilah ran into her at the grocery store. And you're trying to destroy them over some schoolyard drama? Shame on you. Maya stopped going to school. The administration had suggested a temporary transfer to online learning for everyone's safety, which really meant they didn't want to deal with the controversy. She spent her days at home, working through assignments, preparing for the hearing, trying to process the trauma while simultaneously gearing up for battle. But she wasn't alone. Remember those students who'd witnessed everything in the hallway? Some of them had stayed silent out of fear. But just a few brave souls, had come forward. A girl named Ashley Chen had been recording on her phone from a different angle. A sophomore named Marcus Wells had written a detailed statement about everything he'd seen. They were terrified, but they were willing to testify. Why are you doing this? Maya had asked Ashley during one of their video calls while preparing for the hearing. You could just stay out of it. It would be safer. Ashley had looked at her with fierce determination. Because I'm tired of being scared of Evan Lorne. I'm tired of watching him hurt people and getting away with it. And because what happened to you was wrong. Someone has to stand up. Might as well be me. That's what courage looks like, you know? It's not the absence of fear. It's being terrified and doing the right thing anyway. The misconduct hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks after the incident. 3 weeks for the Lorne family to prepare their defense, to rally their supporters, to do everything in their power to make this go away. And they tried everything. Officer Lorne's attorney painted him as a devoted father who'd simply been protecting his son from a violent student. They tried to get Maya's phone records suppressed. They dug into Delilah's past cases, looking for anything they could use to discredit her. They even tried to claim that Maya had a history of aggressive behavior, a complete fabrication, but they were desperate. Evan himself doubled down on the lie. In his statement, he described Maya as having attacked him unprovoked, claiming she'd been unstable and aggressive from the moment she arrived at school. His friends backed up every word, their stories rehearsed and synchronized. On the surface, it looked like it might actually work. The Lorne family had money, connections, and decades of goodwill built up in the community. They had people in power who owed them favors. They had a legacy to protect. But they had underestimated 2 things. First, they'd underestimated the power of truth when it's properly documented. Maya's recording from that first hallway encounter was crystal clear. The school's security footage showed exactly what had happened during the second confrontation. Multiple witnesses contradicted Evan's story. And the body cam footage from Officer Lorne's own equipment, which they'd tried desperately to keep sealed, was damning. And second, they'd underestimated what happens when you push a mother protecting her child too far. The night before the hearing, Maya couldn't sleep again. She was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, rehearsing what she would say, when she heard something outside.
A sound.
Movement. She got up, went to her window, and looked out at their driveway. Someone was there. A figure in dark clothing, moving near their garage. Mom. Maya's voice came out as a strangled whisper, but it was loud enough. Delilah was in the room in seconds. They watched together as the figure did something near the garage door, then hurried away into the darkness. A few seconds later, they heard a car engine start in the distance and speed off. Call 911, Delilah said, but even as she spoke, they smelled it. Smoke. The garage was on fire. The next few minutes were chaos. Fire trucks, police cars, neighbors spilling out of their houses in pajamas. The fire department got it under control quickly. Whoever had said it hadn't used enough accelerant, thankfully, but the message was clear. This was the or else from that brick through their window. This was the Lorne family saying, drop the case, or we'll destroy you." Maya and her mother stood in their front yard, wrapped in blankets despite the warm night, watching firefighters douse the last of the flames. Maya was shaking, not from cold, but from rage. "They tried to burn down our house," she said, her voice hollow. "They actually tried to burn down our house." "I know, baby," Delilah replied, and there was steel in her voice now. Steel and fury and absolute determination. And they just made the biggest mistake of their lives. Because here's what the Lorne family didn't understand. Intimidation works on people who have something to lose. But when you've already lost your sense of safety, when you've already been brutalized and threatened and now almost killed, you have nothing left to lose. And that makes you dangerous. The arson investigators found evidence almost immediately. Gasoline residue. Footprints in the garden bed. And when they pulled security footage from a neighbor's camera across the street, they got a clear shot of the vehicle that had sped away. It was registered to a friend of the Lorne family. Someone with ties to Evan's grandfather, the former sheriff. The web was unraveling. The misconduct hearing took place in a packed conference room at the county administrative building. On one side sat Officer Raymond Lorne, his attorney, his son Evan, and his father, retired Sheriff Gerald Lorne, a man in his 70s who still carried himself like he owned the town. Their supporters filled half the room. On the other side sat Maya and Delilah, flanked by the witnesses who'd agreed to testify, Ashley, Marcus, and 2 others. Their side of the room was smaller but fierce. The hearing officer, a stern woman named Commissioner Patricia Hayes, opened the proceedings with a reminder that this was about facts, not emotions. That they would hear evidence, testimony, and make a determination based on the preponderance of that evidence. Officer Lawrence's attorney went first, and he was good. He painted a picture of a dedicated officer and father who'd responded to a credible report of assault against his son. He argued that Officer Lorne had followed protocol, that his use of force was justified, that this was all a tragic misunderstanding blown out of proportion. Then it was Delilah's turn. She stood up, and the room fell silent. Judge Delilah Kingsley didn't need to raise her voice to command attention. She simply spoke truth, clearly and methodically. She presented Maya's original recording from a hallway, Evan's threats, his intimidation, his abuse of power. She presented the school's security footage showing Evan grabbing for Maya's phone, faking his injury, lying to everyone present. She presented witness statements that contradicted every part of Evan's story. And then came the body cam footage. Officer Lawrence's own camera had captured everything. His excessive force. Maya's pleas that he was hurting her. His threats whispered in her ear, caught perfectly on audio. "You're going to learn what happens when you mess with the Lorne family." The room was dead silent as the footage played. Some people in the Lorne family section looked uncomfortable. Others looked away. Retired Sheriff Gerald Lawrence's face was turning red. But Delilah wasn't done. She presented evidence of the threatening phone calls, the vandalism, the brick through their window. And then she presented the arson investigation report, including the evidence, linking it to Lorne family associates. "This isn't just about one officer's misconduct," Delilah said, her voice ringing through the room. "This is about a family that believes they are above the law, that believes their badge, their legacy, their power gives them the right to brutalize a child, to threaten her family, to attempt to burn down our home when we refuse to be silenced. This is about a pattern of abuse that has gone unchecked for too long." Then came the witnesses. Ashley Chin took the stand first, her hands shaking but her voice clear. She described what she'd seen, how Evan had orchestrated everything, how he'd done similar things to other students for years. She presented her own phone footage that corroborated Maya's account. Marcus Wells testified about Evan's reputation, about the culture of fear he'd created at Brookwood High. Another student testified about being bullied by Evan the previous year, too scared to report it because of his family connections. The picture that emerged was devastating. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was a family that had weaponized their positions of power for years, creating an environment where abuse went unreported because everyone knew the Lawrence were untouchable. Finally, Maya took the stand. She was terrified.
Her hands were sweating.
Her heart was racing. But she looked Commissioner Hayes in the eye and told her story. Every detail, every moment of fear, the handcuffs cutting into her wrists, the helplessness of being slammed against a car by an adult with a badge who should have been protecting her. "I just wanted to go to school," Maya said, and her voice cracked. "I just wanted to make friends and learn and have a normal high school experience. Instead, I got targeted by a bully who knew his father would protect him no matter what he did. And when I tried to stand up for myself, when I tried to document what was happening so I'd have proof, they tried to destroy me. They tried to destroy my family. And they almost succeeded. But I'm still here. And I'm not going to let them win." When she finished, there were tears on more than a few faces in the room. The Lorne family's attorney tried to cross-examine, tried to poke holes in the testimony, but there was nothing to poke holes in. The evidence was overwhelming. The truth was undeniable. Commissioner Hayes called a recess to review everything. The wait felt like hours, even though it was only 45 minutes. When they reconvened, Hayes looked tired but resolute. After reviewing all the evidence and testimony presented today, she began, "I find that Officer Raymond Lorne engaged in unlawful arrest, excessive use of force, abuse of authority, and intimidation of witnesses. His actions were not in accordance with department policy, state law, or constitutional protections. I am recommending his immediate termination from the police force and referral to the district attorney for criminal prosecution." Officer Lorne's face went white. Furthermore, Hayes continued, "I am recommending that Evan Lorne be expelled from Brookwood High School and that charges be filed in juvenile court for filing a false police report and conspiracy to commit assault. And I am referring this matter to the State Attorney General's office to investigate potential obstruction of justice by retired Sheriff Gerald Lorne and others who may have been involved in the intimidation campaign against the Kingsley family." The Lorne section of the room erupted.
Shouts.
Protests. Gerald Lorne stood up, his face purple with rage, pointing at Hayes. "You don't know what you've done. My family has served this community for." "Your family," Hayes interrupted coldly, "has abused this community for generations. And it ends today. We're adjourned." The aftermath was swift and decisive. Officer Raymond Lorne was terminated within the week. Criminal charges followed: assault, unlawful arrest, official misconduct. He would eventually plead guilty to avoid trial, receiving probation and community service, his law enforcement career over forever. Evan Lorne was expelled. He faced charges in juvenile court and was ordered to complete anger management counseling and community service. His college acceptance letters were withdrawn. His future looked very different than the privileged path he'd always assumed was his. Retired Sheriff Gerald Lorne was investigated for obstruction of justice and witness intimidation. While he wasn't criminally charged due to lack of direct evidence, his legacy was forever tarnished. The Lorne legacy that had dominated local law enforcement for decades became a cautionary tale instead of a point of pride. The arson conspirators were arrested and prosecuted. Some took plea deals. Others went to trial. All were convicted. But the impact went beyond just the Lorne family. Brookwood High School implemented new anti-bullying policies with actual teeth. They hired counselors specifically trained in handling power dynamics and abuse. They created anonymous reporting systems that actually protected students. Ashley Chun started a student advocacy group that became a model for other schools. The police department underwent a complete review of their procedures, installing better oversight and accountability measures. The culture of protecting one of their own, regardless of wrongdoing, began to change, slowly but surely. And Maya? 3 months after the hearing, Brookwood High School held a special assembly. Maya stood on the stage. She decided to return to school, to finish what she started, and received an award for courage and civic responsibility. The principal spoke about how Maya's bravery had sparked necessary change, how her refusal to be silenced had made the school and community safer for everyone. Ashley stood with her. Marcus stood with her. Other students who'd found their own courage stood with her. And in the audience, Judge Delilah Kingsley watched her daughter with tears streaming down her face and pride radiating from every pore. When Maya took the microphone to speak, she looked out at the sea of faces, some supportive, some still uncomfortable with how everything had unfolded, and she spoke from the heart. "I didn't want to be brave," she said. "I didn't want any of this. I just wanted to go to school. But when you're faced with injustice, when you see abuse of power, when you experience brutality, you have a choice. You can stay silent and safe, or you can speak up and risk everything. I chose to speak up. And yeah, it was terrifying. It was painful. There were nights I wished I'd just kept my head down and accepted how things were." She paused, her eyes finding her mother's in the crowd. "But then I remember what my mom taught me, that silence in the face of injustice makes you complicit, that the law is supposed to protect everyone equally, not just people with power. That courage isn't about not being afraid, it's about being afraid and doing the right thing anyway." So if there's anyone out there dealing with bullying, with abuse, with people who think they're untouchable, document everything. Tell someone. Find people who'll stand with you. Because you're not alone. And the truth, when it's properly told, when people are brave enough to speak it, the truth has power. The applause started small but built into something thunderous. Students were standing. Teachers were standing. Even some of the parents who'd been skeptical at first were standing. Because Maya's story had reminded them of something fundamental, that justice isn't just about laws and courts and hearings. It's about regular people finding the courage to stand up, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. After the assembly, as students filtered out into the hallways, Maya stood by her locker, a different one, in a different hallway, far from where the nightmare had started. Ashley walked up with a small group of other students. "Hey," Ashley said. "Some of us are going to get pizza. You want to come?" Maya smiled, a real smile, the kind she hadn't felt capable of for months.
"Yeah," she said.
"I'd like that." As they walked together toward the parking lot, chattering about normal high school things like homework and weekend plans and the upcoming dance, Maya felt something she hadn't felt since that terrible first day. She felt like she belonged. She felt safe. She felt free. That night, at home, Maya and her mother sat together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The garage had been repaired. The graffiti was gone. The threatening calls had stopped. Life was returning to something resembling normal. "You did good, baby," Delilah said quietly, squeezing her daughter's hand. "I'm so proud of you." "We did good, Mom," Maya corrected. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, and then Maya spoke again. "Do you think it's really over?" Delilah considered the question carefully. "The legal part is over. The Lawrence will never have that kind of power again. But the work of standing up for what's right? That's never really over. There will always be bullies. There will always be people who abuse power. The question is whether there will be people brave enough to stop them." "And you think I'm one of those people?" Maya asked. "I know you are," Delilah replied. "You proved it. And you inspired others to be brave, too. That's a ripple effect that will last long after this moment."
Maya thought about that.
About Ashley and Marcus and all the other students who'd found their courage. About the policies that had changed. About the culture shift happening at Brookwood and beyond. About how one person refusing to be silenced could spark a movement. "Then it was worth it," Maya said finally. "All of it. The fear, the threats, everything. It was worth it." And as the sun set on that chapter of Maya's life, as she sat with her mother on that porch feeling safe and loved and proud of what she'd accomplished, she understood something profound. Justice isn't something that's given. It's something you fight for. And sometimes, the fight starts with a single person saying, "No, not anymore. This ends now." Maya Kingsley had been that person. And because she had the courage to press record, to speak up, to refuse to be broken, dozens of other students would never have to face what she faced. The Lorne family's reign of intimidation was over. Real accountability had replaced the old culture of protection. One girl, one phone, one act of courage. Sometimes, that's all it takes to change the world. Remember, if you see injustice, document it. If you see abuse, report it. If you see someone being brave, stand with them. Because courage is contagious. And change starts with people who refuse to stay silent. This story was inspired by real events that happen every day: students who face bullying, families who face retaliation, and brave individuals who choose justice over safety. If you're facing something similar, know that you're not alone. Speak up, document everything, and never forget that your voice matters.